Thank you, Mr. Haakabi, for giving us this time.
Thank you.
Everyone is waiting for the news from Netanyahu concerning the deal in Gaza to stop the war and to have the hostages released. Are you optimistic this time that there could be a deal?
I always want to be optimistic, but I've seen in every iteration of talks that things look like they're moving toward a resolve, and then Hamas changes the terms right at the end and makes it impossible. So I hope this is a point where we're close to getting this finished and complete, getting all the hostages, not just a few, but all of them home. And the President's message has been very clear. Hamas can't stay, they can't govern, they have no role in the future of Gaza. The sooner they understand that, the better. But they need to let all the hostages go, both the living and the deceased. The families of the deceased hostages, they need to have closure to their loved ones. And obviously the living hostages, some of whom are in very, very bad shape, they need to be released so that they can regain their health and their strength.
Yeah. Hearing the news from Israel, the military leaks from the military says basically the only way to release them is to have a deal. And the military and the opposition in Israel are concerned that Netanyahu wanted this war for political purposes, and the mission being accomplished, and the only goal for the war is to release the hostages, and it's only by deal.
I don't agree that the Prime Minister wants to keep the war going. I think anyone who knows what really happens in this process knows that's simply not true. And I'll tell you why. Ron Dermer, who, as you may know, is the closest confidant of the Prime Minister in his office, right this moment has two sons fighting in Gaza. For anyone who doesn't think Ron Dermer wants his own sons home, I can assure you he does. Ambassador Leiter, who is the Israeli ambassador to the United States, had a son who was killed fighting in Gaza. I'm pretty sure he wants the war to end. When I'm in the Prime Minister's office, I see a number of people, many of whom have sons or daughters who are in Gaza right now. Or maybe they're in the reserve and they're on active duty, they're away from their families. I can assure you they want the war to end. It is totally untrue to think that the Prime Minister wants to prolong the war for political purposes. Quite frankly, it's not helping the political ends for anyone for this to extend. But I just want people to remember why the war continues. It's not because the Prime Minister wants it to. It's not because the U.S. wants it to, I can assure you that. It's because the stubbornness of Hamas, not only in holding hostages, innocent people who were kidnapped and then tortured after they murdered and massacred 1,200, but they don't want to give this up. And they're willing to starve their own people. They're willing to murder their own people, to see the suffering, and to be indifferent to it.
But Mr. Ambassador, now we have voices from Israel. The novelist, famous one, David Grossman, and others, the B'Tselem, the Hars, are saying it's genocide, what the Israeli military is doing there, starving people to death. The UNICEF says a classroom of children being killed daily in Gaza. So the Israel is conducting the war in a way that inflicts a huge number of Palestinian casualties and civilians. And we don't hear the United States taking actions or voicing criticism.
Well, that surprises me because the United States set up a feeding program called GHF to get food to people, but in a way that Hamas couldn't steal it. By the UN's own numbers, 92% of the food that they send into Gaza is stolen or looted, mostly by Hamas, who then takes it, puts it in a warehouse, sells it on the black market, makes last year alone $500 million US dollars. That's 500 million US dollars selling the food to the people who should be getting it for free in humanitarian aid. That's really troubling. I don't think people recognize that Israel has allowed, and they have actually put in 2 million tons of food The trouble is that Hamas makes sure that it doesn't go to the people who most need it. But one other thing that's important for people to remember, there's really no food being given to the hostages, and the Red Cross has not raised their voice against the treatment of them. They have not demanded to go see them. And the videos that we saw a couple of weeks ago are very, very troubling. They not only were hungry and emaciated, but they were being forced to dig their own graves and have videos of it, exploiting their suffering, and that's inhumane and horrible.
Let's move to the political file. Now the Israelis are not hiding. They endorsed the plan to build in E1. Everyone, the entire world is condemning that. Only the US administration is not condemning that. And that is undermining the two-state solution. So if the two-state solution is off the table, the one-state solution is off the table, what kind of solution would you offer to this conflict and to the Palestinian people?
I think the tragedy is that what the Europeans have done in the recent weeks have really set the idea of some type of moving forward. It set it back dramatically. I'm convinced that when Emmanuel Macron and the UK, the Netherlands, Ireland, Canada, all started saying they were going to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state, they did two things they probably didn't intend to do. One, they emboldened Hamas. Hamas felt empowered. They felt, this is great. We're going to achieve the goal of October the 7th of having slaughtered all these Israelis across the border. We're going to get a Palestinian state out of it. So it's a price to pay, but we're going to get what we wanted. That was the first thing that happened. The second thing, it really kind of emboldened the Israelis to say, well, if you're going to go ahead and violate Oslo, which this is, because under Oslo, there has to be a cooperative process through which the Israelis and the Palestinians are working for a two-state solution, if that's what they both want. But if you do it unilaterally, you're violating Oslo. So if you're going to do that and blow that whole agreement up...
But what about the people?
But let me just finish. If you're going to do that, then Israel looks at that and says, well, if you're going to violate Oslo, we might as well go ahead and start annexing and declaring sovereignty over property. I think the Europeans have done a great disservice to the Palestinian people. And quite frankly, the PA has done a disservice by pushing this and moving it forward, knowing that it was not going to be well received by either Israel or the United States.
But look at the reality. West Bank is small in size. It's less than 6,000 square kilometers, where more than 3 million Palestinians live. It barely accommodates the Palestinians. And Israel is pushing hundreds of thousands of settlers to live there. And the settlers are taking over the resources. You know, we don't have water these days in West Bank. They take the resources, the land, and confine the Palestinians into their communities. That's a recipe for prolonging the conflict, not solving it. And everyone is waiting to hear from the Americans what they are up to do.
Americans would love to see a peaceful resolution where everyone can live in peace and in harmony and also in prosperity. I personally have been involved in shuttling back and forth between Ramallah and the Israeli government, trying to deal with some issues financially that really are hurting Palestinians. The excess shekels, the correspondent banking issue, and probably the most urgent and acute one is the remittance money that is supposed to go back to the PA, collected by the Israelis. And I thought we were making some progress on that. And then everything essentially was blown up by what the Europeans started demanding and wanting to go to the UN in September and have a conference and unilaterally declare the Palestinian state. I say again, it also ruined the negotiations. Secretary Rubio, speaking 2 weekends ago, mentioned this and said that the talks were progressing, and then when that came out, and you had Macron and Starmer and the others saying, well, we're just going to recognize Palestinian state on our own.
But the
talks were over, and I'll tell you what happened in the effort to try to resolve this financial crisis. It just collapsed completely.
But these are the rights of the Palestinians, the right of the Palestinian Authority. In order to pay services, salaries, they need their money. And Smotrich is withholding the money for political reason. He wants this PA to collapse and for political reason. And the successive U.S. administration used to put some pressure on the Israeli government to release this money. The things that we don't see from your side.
I think we're trying to put some pressure, but we're also wanting the Palestinian Authority, and when I've met with their officials, I've made it very clear that one of the things the Israelis want some assurance of is that the money paid to families of terrorists will end, that will not continue. That's been a real sore spot, not just for the Israelis, but for the Americans as well. And that educational materials, curriculum in the schools, need to no longer glorify the idea that the Jewish people are enemies and that it's okay to kill them. These are things that should be reasonable, and I still hope we can work towards some form of relief, because in my view, and I've said this publicly and I say it to you today, the people who are really being hurt by some of this conflict are not the PA officials. It's the Palestinians who just want to go to work every day, feed their families, put items on their stores' shelves, drive their cabs, work in their jobs. They deserve better.
You've been to the West Bank, you visited Taibeh and Sinjil and other places. Every day we see settlers attacking Palestinians in every single place. It's clear that they are trying to displace and replace Palestinians. We see in Bethlehem, it's a Christian community and you are Christian. Bethlehem is ringed with settlements. All of their land, most of their lands were taken. And they don't have land for the future, for their new generation, for housing, for economy. And we don't see a kind of sympathy from your side with those Palestinian Christian even.
I don't know that it's a lack of sympathy. There's a limit on what the U.S. can do in the middle of a sovereign nation making its own decisions. People are certainly free to move into areas that they can purchase. They're not free to take someone else's land. We've been very clear about that. And the reason that I went to Taibeh was because I wanted to see with my own eyes some vandalism that had happened. We still don't know exactly who did it. I hope we can find out. I've been very adamant that whenever a crime is committed or an act of terror is carried out, who does it is of less importance than making sure that we find them, consequence them to the fullest extent of the law, and we continue to push, especially for the murder of the young 20-year-old Palestinian youth here from Tampa, Florida. I went to the home of that family. We waited a couple of weeks to get the medical report so that we could share that with the authorities. And we have continued to ask, almost on a daily basis, what is the update on the investigation? I assure you it hasn't been forgotten. That young American citizen is a responsibility that I personally take very seriously, and we want answers. So we continue to push for that.
One final question, one last question. People are wondering, they hear your statements and they are wondering, are you reflecting the Trump administration position or it's your own position? This is one. The second, President Trump in his first term presented a deal called the deal of the century. Is it still on the table? Is he planning to present it again or present a new formula of peace proposition?
In the first Trump term, it was very unfortunate the leaders of the Palestinian Authority wanted nothing to do with the Abraham Accords. They walked away. They said, nope, we're not going to participate. And that's frankly the pattern that has been there since 1947, since 67, throughout the entire long conflict that has been here. The leaders, first of the PLO, now the Palestinian Authority, have simply said, no, we don't want to be a part of those efforts. In 1995, when Palestinian Authority was offered almost 95% of everything they wanted, Yasser Arafat said no, we reject it. It's been very difficult to see progress when there were things put on the table that seemed incredibly, even overly generous, were rejected outright. So I don't know if the president will revive some of the things he talked about in the first term, but I do know that one of his priorities is the expansion of the Abraham Accords. But for that to work, there has to be a willingness, not only for the Israelis, there has to be a willingness on the Palestinian Authority to come to the table and to sincerely and legitimately work toward a resolution.
But the Israelis are negotiating the cake and eating it at the same time. They are building settlements non-stop, so nothing left to negotiate.
The sooner there is room at the table and people talk, I think things would get better. They're not going to get better if the Palestinian Authority officials go to New York and start partnering with the Europeans and calling for a Palestinian state that violates Oslo, that does not include cooperation and discussion with the Israelis. It's counterproductive. May not seem very comforting to the Palestinians, but actions have consequences. And the actions that have been taken, unfortunately, have some consequences, some of which are consequences that are going against some things I'm personally trying to get resolved in the financial process. But I can't as long as the incitement of creating this tension continues.
Thank you, Mr. Hakabi. Thank you.
Thank you.